Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's program, QIO 508 Compliance Training. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Later, you will have the opportunity to ask questions during the question and answer session. You may register to ask a question at any time by pressing the star and 1 on your touch-tone phone. You may withdraw yourself from the queue by pressing the pound key. Please note this call may be recorded. I'll be standing by if you should need any assistance. It is now my pleasure to turn the conference over to Swati Daniels. Please go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for attending the 508 Compliance Training for Word and PowerPoint documents. This training will teach and demonstrate how to make your documents compliant by following certain standards and guidelines. This training is for absolute beginners as well as seasoned 508 analysts. I am Swati Daniels, the Technology Manager and 508 Analyst at the Bizzell Group. I have over 7 years experience remediating documents for private and government clients. I am excited to share the knowledge I have picked up over the years, and hopefully this training will assist all of you with creating a 508 process for your organization as well as having 508 compliant ready documents. Please save any questions you may have till the end of the training and I will answer them for you. Next slide, please. Here is today's agenda. We will be covering several 508 topics. Before we begin, can we have our first poll question, please? This will give us an idea of which organizations our participants belong to. Please take a minute to answer. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So what is 508 compliance? For those who are new to 508 compliance, I want to go through a short introduction. And for those who are already familiar with 508, this will be a refresher. So what is 508 compliance? It's an amendment to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It requires federal agencies and contractors to make electronic and information technology accessible to individuals with disabilities. The law applies to all federal agencies and contractors when they develop, procure, maintain, or use electronic and information technology. It also applies to all publicly accessed websites and documents. Next slide, please. So what is ICT? ICT stands for Information and Communications Technology. It refers to technologies that provide access to information through telecommunications. This can be in the form of websites and web applications, mobile applications, as well as documents, including Word documents, PowerPoint presentations, Excel files, and PDF files. Next slide, please. Now, why is 508 so important? A person with a visual disability uses assistive technology such as a screen reader to access the content or information. So why is it important? Because it eliminates the barriers in information technology. The goal is for the individuals with the disabilities to have comparable access and use of information and data as individuals without disabilities. So what a sighted person can see, a disabled person should also be able to access and view. All content should be accessible as well as usable. In other words, having a disability should not put someone at a disadvantage when trying to access information electronically. Next slide, please. Are there consequences? Yes. The consequences of non-compliance are a stakeholder could file a complaint against the organization. An organization could be required to pay attorney's fees. Disabled users will not have access to the same information as other users. And the site or product could be less usable for everyone. It is very important for organizations to put in place and update their 508 policies and procedures to keep up with the laws of compliance and to avoid any consequences. Next slide, please. So there are 4 major types of disabilities. There is sight, where a user can be blind, partially sighted, or colorblind. Then there's hearing. A user could be deaf or hard of hearing. Then there's motor disabilities, where there's problems with motor skills or slow movement, as well as cognitive, where learning difficulties or problems with concentrating or reading. So all of these disabilities have to be kept in mind when you are putting in processes for 508. Next slide, please. Source files. We're going to go over what a source file is. All accessibility begins with the source file. That is where the content is initially created. All PDF files are created from other files, called source files, usually in the form of a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation. Many accessibility issues can be fixed within the source file, so less work is needed within the PDF document. Some issues can be fixed within the source file and others may not. Next slide, please. Some of the issues that can be fixed within a source file are contrast, color contrast issues such as images with text. Logos are exempt. We'll look at that in future slides. Color contrast, where text color against background color may not be accessible to somebody who has low vision or is colorblind. Uses of color to convey information, where graphs, charts, and infographics may need alternative text. You can fix those. Shades or colored text that's informational can also be fixed within a source file. Tables, where header rows must repeat if table spans multiple tables. Cells must not break over pages. So these are things that you can fix within a Word document and a PowerPoint document. Also, links. The purpose of the link or destination should be available either by the link text or the surrounding content. This can be checked in the source file as well. Next slide, please. Here we'll discuss color contrast. Color contrast refers to the text color against the background color. For someone who is colorblind or has low vision, they will have a hard time reading light text color against a light background, such as white text on a yellow background. Also, when selecting a design or template in PowerPoint, it's best to use a compliant template or a template approved by your organization. Many of the themes may not be 508 compliant. So the color contrast ratio must be at least 4.5 to 1 for any text. This also applies to images of text, but that are not logos. Why are logos exempt? Because logos are already created and they cannot be changed just because they're not compatible. So logos stay the way they are because that's branding issue. If a company wants to change it, then they can, but usually we don't touch logos. Images of text are strongly discouraged, as in typing text is different, and then taking a picture of text and then putting it into Word or PowerPoint should be avoided at all costs. You can also use an online color contrast analyzer to check the contrast ratio. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to do now is demonstrate how to check for color contrast and use the online color contrast analyzer. All right, here we see color contrast issue. We have white text against yellow background. Now, we can see this because we have good eyesight, but somebody who has low vision or is colorblind will not be able to see this correctly. So how we fix this, I've already written out the color code for the text as well as the background color just to make it easy. So what we're going to do is test this to see whether it matches the 4.5 ratio. So we have the text color, which is white. So WebAIM, this is in the resources later. WebAIM is a site that I use personally for contrast checker. And here you can put in the text color and the background color. So what I'm going to do is I already have the text color here, and I'm going to put that in here. And that's the foreground. Then we'll go back here and take the background color and plug that right here. So now you see it's changed. It went from white to yellow. Here you see the contrast ratio is 1.7. It is very low. So that means this is not accessible. So now what we can do is go back. For example, if we can change the text color to, let's say, black. For example, we'll do black. So you would just highlight the text, change the color to, let's say, black or another darker color. So now it's black. Now how do you find the code for this? So you would highlight the text, go back to your colors, and then you can do more colors. Somehow I have these by heart, but here you can go to the Custom tab, and here you can find the hex for that. The hex code is 0000, so I would copy that, put this, plug it back in here to see the foreground color, and now it should change back to black. Now we see the contrast ratio is 19.55, which is perfect. So now this is accessible. So that's how you would check for contrast within text. Now if you paste an image, like if you just paste text, you cannot change it. So that's why we suggest not paste, taking a picture of text. Okay, back to the presentation, please. Thank you. Next slide, please. For someone with low vision or color blindness, all 4 sections of this pie chart can look the same in color, and the same goes for the bar graph. There is no method for the person to tell the difference between the quarters on the pie chart sections and categories on the bar graph. This is a very bad example and should be avoided. Now, this is because it's difficult for low vision or colorblind people to distinguish the individual bars and pie sections. So this is an example of using only color, and it's a bad example. Next slide, please. Now I will demonstrate how to fix color-only issues. All right, so here's a pie chart, the same that we saw in the slide. Here's a pie chart. Now, because it doesn't have any data values, we cannot distinguish the sections. The pie chart, what we do is you can right-click on your chart right here. And what we're going to do is add values so that we're not only depending on the colors of the sections of the pie chart. So you can just do, you click on here, you click on your chart, and then you can add the values, like add the data labels. And now this makes this compliant because I'm not only depending on the color. So the pie chart now has values within the pie sections. And a person can now not have to only depend on the colors to read the information. Now it does not matter what color the chart is. Now the same goes for the bar graph. Here's a bar graph. We can do the same thing. So what we can do is add the data labels. So somebody is not just, so a user is not just dependent on the bars itself, the colors. And also another trick that people do is, what I've had to do in the past is put patterns on the individual bars. So you do that by going into the paint here. Hold on. Okay, so you can actually format and change the styles over here. So, but I try to avoid doing that. So what you would do is just keep this the way it is, and this way the same thing for the bar graph. Here the bars have been given data labels distinguishing each bar. So these changes can be made within the Word and PowerPoint document. If the graphs and charts are inserted directly from an Excel worksheet, then the values, legends, and colors can be added and changed. But if the chart or graph is an image, it may not be easy to add patterns or values or the data labels. You may add alt text to the image. We will cover alt text in the upcoming slides. Back to the presentation, please. All right. So that was a correct use of colors and labels to convey information. It's easier to distinguish the individual bars and pie sections, and data is understandable. Next slide, please. So here we see, this is where we check charts and graphs in Grayscale. Grayscale is where it's a good practice to view charts and graphs in Grayscale. It gives you an idea of how a low vision or low vision person sees a graph with multiple colors. So what we're going to do is I'm going to demo on how a quick way to view images in Grayscale. All right, so here we have our charts again, the ones that we created earlier. And what I've done is taken screenshots, so that's what you would do. To view a chart or graph in Grayscale, you will first need to take a screenshot of it. Then you can view it in Grayscale using the picture properties. This is an extra step you can take if you want to be 100% sure that your content is accessible. So here I have my charts here. So what I'm going to do is I click on my image, and then there's a picture format tool here. You can use that if you'd like. And in color, under color, you can pick the very first saturation, which is Grayscale. And now what that does is shows you what a low vision user sees. Now, I honestly cannot distinguish which bar is which. They almost look similar. Even on the pie chart, it looks similar, even though they're different colors. So always remember, this is what somebody who cannot see very well sees. So this is why there's an extra step. So I have another image. So here's one with the data, labels, and patterns created. So here, what I'm going to do, here's another screenshot of my accessible chart and my charts. So what I'm going to do is click on here, go to the picture properties, and you go to color. Again, you'll pick the first saturation, which is 0, which is Grayscale. And now I can actually distinguish the sections of the pie as well as the bar graphs. So I don't have to depend on just the colors of the sections. I know which part is 8.2, which is 3.2. I know on the graph, what category has what data. So that's just an extra tip if you really want to make sure. And I would suggest it for graphs and charts. Back to presentation, please. Thank you. Next slide, please. We're going to look at hyperlinks. Now, hyperlinks, they're throughout documents. There's a lot of documents that have hyperlinks. PowerPoint have them, Word have them. So some tips to follow with hyperlinks is give hyperlink text a different color from surrounding text so it's easier to locate. Use the same color for all hyperlinks within the document. Always underline hyperlinked text. Use text for hyperlinks if possible instead of the full URL. For example, if you do www.cdc.gov and the whole URL, it's a little difficult to understand, especially when using a screen reader. But then an accessible version would be cancer data and statistics. First of all, it describes the link location, and it's easier to understand. Also, avoid vague link text such as click here, go there, link. Use descriptive text, just like cancer data and statistics. If it said click here, nobody knows where this is going to go. Validate that all links work, that they are active and they go where they're supposed to go and opens up the correct website or document. Also, the full URL may also not be accessible because the user cannot tell where the URL will take them, and it does not describe the page destination. Some documents may contain hyperlinks. Always make sure the links are active, as I already mentioned, and make sure that if there's a document that it opens up, that it's listed. Like, for example, if a hyperlink downloads a file or opens a new window, please indicate that within the link. For example, an accessible link would be organizational chart PDF 5.62 MB, so that they know, because not everybody wants to open up a PDF or a document. They just want to go to a website. Next slide, please. Headings. Headings are very important for a document because a screen reader depends on headings in order to let the user know where they are in a document. Headings are very important in all documents. They define the document structure and enable screen readers to navigate the document. Always use the built-in tool to create heading styles. Never type something and then highlight it and then change the font and all that kind of stuff. Always use the inbuilt tool, because once a document is converted to a PDF, or if a screen reader reads the document, it has a structure. I'm going to demo, please, headings. So here we have headings. Here's the sample headings in a research paper. It may be introduction, research, analysis, findings, and conclusions. So what to avoid is just selecting to like introduction, bolding it, underlining it, changing the font to a different color, and then just saying that's a heading. That is something that will fail accessibility. So what I suggest is using the inbuilt heading styles right here. So for introduction, you can create your own headings, custom headings, but always try to come back here and utilize this tool here. So for introduction, I'd like to use this heading. For research, I'd like to use my heading 2, and so forth, heading 3. So headings go, as you can see on the slide, that they go from heading 1 to heading 4. And this is usually the document title or main page. So this is like the main introduction to the document. It's the content heading. It is the most important. Then there's heading 2, which is usually a major section heading. And then heading 3 would be a subsection of heading 2. And then heading 4, usually the subsection of heading 3. You can create as many headings you want, but they have to be in a sequential order. Back to the presentation, please. All right, next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about lists. Lists, also for lists are numbered list orders. They're numbered lists, they're ordered, and bulleted lists are unordered. So this means they're very important elements of a document because they help users of assistive technology to navigate and understand the items on the list. A screen reader can identify a list and tell the screen reader how many items are on the list. For example, it will say list of 5 items, bullet 3. While creating lists, avoid manually creating lists. Just like headings, I recommend avoiding creating them manually. Use a bulleted list to group together related items. Use a numbered list to show steps in a process. Use the built-in tool of the application to create lists. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to use the built-in tool to create a list. So here we have two columns. We have one which is numbered list, for example, steps to make a sandwich. And then there's a bulleted list, which is kinds of fruits. So here I've created, so what I mean by not creating by yourself is when you create, let's say, so you have your first item, and then you tab and do something else here, and then do, okay, here. So this is manually creating a list, which is not accessible at all. So what you would do is you have your list right here, and then you can just highlight it, and then use one of these inbuilt tools right here. So this would be for the steps, for the bulleted list right here, and this would be for the numbered list. So this is ordered, and this is bulleted, and you would use this inbuilt tool for bullets. And that's how you would make lists accessible for 508. And this way now, the screen reader will be able to read this in order, and it would say list of 5 items or list with 5 bullets. Back to the presentation, please. Thank you. Next slide, please. Images are the most important items in a document and must be 508 compliant. Since a blind reader cannot see the image, the information that the image conveys has to be described via alt text. Documents may contain images. Some images convey information, and some are simply decorative. But all images must have alternate text. Alt text should be concise, typically 180 characters or less, and convey the meaning of the image. All decorative images should be marked as decorative. Alt equals no, ignored by assistive technology. So the screen reader, when a user is using a screen reader, it will completely skip over the image if it's decorative. Complex images and graph charts should have detailed alt text or an alternative way to access, such as a transcript or an external link beside the image. Avoid using text or images of text that flash more than 3 times. That is because that can cause seizures in a user. Flashing and flickering content can cause seizures in certain individuals and should be completely avoided. Next slide, please. Sometimes you will encounter flyers, such as the Suicide Prevention Lifeline seen here. All the information is on the flyer, hence all the details need to be included in the alt text. No information should be left out since it's all important details. So in this example, the alt text would be National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and the phone number as well as the website. So this is very important information. Right next to it is a banner, which is also informative. Hence, this also needs alt text describing the type of image it is and what is written in it. So the example alt text here would be banner showing the following text: learn the history behind Bullying Prevention Month. So this applies to all flyers, banners, and infographics. Next slide, please. Some images may have links within them so that when a user clicks on it, it takes them to another page where the image lives. If there is a caption under the link, then you don't need to have an alt text. It can be left empty. But the best option is to combine the caption and the link. For example, there's a link, photo of an amazing lightning storm. So there's a caption describing the image and the link is there as well. This avoids redundancy. Next slide, please. Organizational charts can be simple or very complex. Regardless of the complexity, detailed alt text must be supplied. The format should be as such. Within the alt text, state the title of the org chart, such as, in this example, it is Department of Health and Human Services, Food and Drug Administration, Center for Tobacco Products. Then the levels along with each individual's name. If there is a publicly available version of the org chart, provide the link next to the image or create an appendix at the end of the document with a text version of the org chart. If an alternate version is provided, state that in the alt text as well. For example, link to alternate version follows, or please find an alternate version on page 10, or please find text version in appendix. Next slide, please. The same alt text format applies to graphs and charts as well. The alt text should contain the title of the graph, the type of graph, whether it's a bar graph, pie chart, workflow, Venn diagram. Then the data should be written out as best as possible. Again, if there is an alternate version, please provide a link to it or include it at the end of the document. So for example, in this screenshot, I have it read, the alt text is bar graph showing the share of people who believe that extreme global poverty has decreased in the last 20 years. And then I have spelled out the data. You can be more specific, but just for example purposes, I've just broken it down a little bit where I have written out the categories and their percentages. Next slide, please. Logos and images of people. As I mentioned before, logos also have alternate text. You don't have to worry about their color contrast, but you do have to worry about the alt text for logos. All logos must have alt text, and screen readers cannot read the text on the images. The alt text can be exactly what the text displays, or the acronym can be spelled out like it is for the QIO logo. So the alt text for cms.gov would just be cms.gov logo. And for the second one, for QIO, it can be QIO logo or spelled out, QIO Quality Improvement Organization logo. So all logos must have alt text. All images of people should have alt text as well. Avoid using image of in the alt text because it causes redundancy. When adding alt text to a person's photo, use the following format: headshot of, and then the title if available. A screen reader will read an image as such: image, photo of George Washington. If the word image is added to the alt text, the screen reader will read out the following: image, image of George Washington. The reader is already informed there is an image on the page, so no need to repeat it. Now I will demonstrate on how to add alt text to photos and logos. So here I have a presentation, and here I have a headshot of a person. I have Jennifer McCarthy. So she does not have an alt text at the moment. So because this is a person, I have to put the alt text as headshot of Jennifer McCarthy. So to do this in PowerPoint, you'll just click on the image, right-click, and do Edit Alt Text. All right, and here you have the alt text box that shows up. All you would have to do is type headshot of Jennifer McCarthy. You can leave it at that, or you can add her credentials, and you can add any more items that you want. But I would just leave it simple as this right now because the screen reader is going to read it anyways because the caption is there right below her name. Okay, and then for logos, right here, it would be the same thing. You would have alt text, and then let me just, back to presentation, please. Thank you. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of decorative images. Decorative images supply no information at all. They are purely decorative and can have an empty alt text. There is no need to type the text null. There is no need to type the text null as an alt text for an image. In the next slide, I will demonstrate how to set an image's alt text to null. This way, the screen reader will skip announcing the image as if it were never there. So also another tip, I suggest not using too many decorative images if not necessary. I will now demo how to make decorative images null. So here we have an image which is decorative, purely decorative. That means it shows no information, it's just there for aesthetic purposes. So what we do is the same thing. You click on the image, and then you do the right click and get edit alt text, which comes up here. Instead of putting anything in here, there's an option down here that says mark as decorative. So you don't have to type in the text alt equals no. That's mainly for, coding on a website. But it's just good to know that that's what that means. So here, all you do is mark as decorative. Now, what happens is the text area is grayed out. That means there is no alt text, it's purely decorative. And when a screen reader now reads this document, it will skip over this image completely as if it never existed. Another example is right here. This is just decorative as well, as in it's not really giving me information. Yes, there's people holding hands and teamwork, but it doesn't mean anything to, it's not conveying any information. So the same thing, you would just mark that as decorative, and then this gets grayed out. So it's the same thing within Word. If you want to do that in Word, so the same thing in Word. Here's an image which is non-informative. I would just click on it, right-click, edit alt text. It's marked as decorative in the other one, and I copied it over. So here's the same thing, mark it as decorative, and it's gone. You cannot type anything else in here. So those are the ways to put images to background. Back to presentation, please. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I'm going to demo on, I actually just demoed, but I'm going to demo again on how to add alt text in Word and PowerPoint once again. So please demo. Thank you. So here I have my infographic from earlier. So again, right here I go right-click on my image, edit alt text, and I get my field to put in the alt text. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just spell out everything. Flyer displaying the following information, and then just write out everything. And then the website. So that would be that. That's how you add alt text for flyers. Or anything that has information, you would have to put it all in the alt text. You cannot miss a single detail, because if you miss a single detail, then a user who's using a screen reader will miss out as well, and that could be something very important that they've missed out on. And the same thing with the banner. You would just describe. So here you see it's generated automatically, and that has nothing to do with the banner. So you would just delete that if it auto-generates an alt text. And then you would just put in banner displaying the following information, and then just type it out. And in alt text, you don't really have to worry too much about formatting and anything, if it's an order, because it just reads it as plain text. So even if you press enter between them or you put bullets or anything, it does not get read. It's just plain text. Back to presentation, please. Now, tables. Tables are used to present data in a tabular form. This means sighted readers can scan a table and understand table data, cell, and header relationships. But somebody who uses a screen reader it requires headers and row markups in order to announce data by default. It reads the data horizontally, cell by cell, row by row. Always use the insert table option and not draw option. It's always safe to use the inbuilt tools in Word and PowerPoint. Make sure headers are repeated for all tables, small or large. So you don't have to add them in, and once a screen reader reads a table, it will announce the headers on every single page if the table is large and spans over a couple of pages. Never let rows break over pages. This breaks the table and makes it very difficult for a blind user to understand the table relationships as well as the beginning and end of a table. Always use tables to display tabular information and not to lay out regular or fancy display. It can confuse a screen reader as well as the user. Next slide, please. Here I'm going to demonstrate on how to create a table in Word and PowerPoint. Inserting a table in Word. So again, instead of drawing a table out of scratch, always use the inbuilt tool. So here in Word, you would do Insert, Table, and then you can choose the amount of rows that you like in columns. For here, I just did this for example, and here's my table. Now, when I create the table, I already see what I need to see here is that the header row option is already checked. But I have to make sure that it's really unchecked. So what I would do is right-click and look at my table properties. So all you would do is click on your table, right-click, table properties, and go to the row tab. Now here under options, it shows allow rows to break across pages, which we want to uncheck, and repeat as header row at the top of each page. So here what we're going to do is repeat it and uncheck that. This is the same as doing it over here, but it doesn't have the option to break across pages. So we always have to go into the table properties. And then you do OK, and this is your table. This is the method I recommend for creating tables. So in PowerPoint, it's the same way in PowerPoint. So you would do Insert, Table, select the rows and columns you'd like, and your table is here. Same thing here, header row, right here. But if you look, you don't have the options for rows breaking over because this is a slide and tables usually don't go on to the next slide. So that option is not here, it's only in Word. Back to the presentation, please. Thank you. So as I just demonstrated, in Word you can right-click on the table and view the table properties on the Row tab under Options unchecked. Allows to break across pages and check repeat as header row at the top of each page. That should always be checked. This is an option in Word only and not in PowerPoint because the tables do not run onto the next slide. Next slide, please. So the main way to find any issues is by using the accessibility checker for both Word and PowerPoint. Running the accessibility checker in Microsoft Word is an essential step in ensuring a document is fully accessible. Using the accessibility checker, you can see what elements of your document need attention to make them accessible to all users. So to run accessibility checker, you will click on File, Info, Check for Issues, and inspect the document and check for accessibility. Thing to remember is always remember that just depending on the accessibility checker alone does not make your document 508 compliant. Color, alt text, links, and reading order require manual checks. So I'm going to demonstrate on how to use the accessibility checker for Word and PowerPoint. So in Word, you would go to File, you would go to Info, and then right here you'll see Inspect Document. This is where you'll need to be. So you would check for issues here, and then there's the second option, Check Accessibility. So what this does is check the document for content that people with disabilities might find difficult to read. Now, I would suggest doing this in the beginning when you start working on your document, the source file, as well as the end, just to make sure that you don't have any outstanding issues. So once I click on Check Accessibility, it runs it. And the accessibility can also be viewed from here. So if you go to Review, you can access it from the Review tab, and it says Check Accessibility here as well. So there's two ways to do it. But in case you don't have this ribbon or tool enabled, then the other way, the first method is the correct way as well. So here you see the accessibility report has come up. So you have a few errors, and then you would expand on the errors, and it says Chart 1 doesn't have alternative text, and neither does Chart 2. So what you would do is go in there and then put in your alt text and fix it. So for example, I'll do pie chart, just for example here. Now I fixed it, so it's gone away. Now my second chart, I want to make it background. So I'm clicking on it, and I'll make it decorative. So now it's gone. Suggestive, it's not something you can actually go in there and fix things, but the errors are the most important. If you have 0 errors, then your document is accessible. You can always have the accessibility checker running in the background. Here is the option, keep accessibility checker running while I work. So as you work through it, it'll bring up any issues. And once you don't have any issues, it'll say document is accessible. So for example here, I'm just going to make this decorative for now, and I'm going to make this decorative for now. So now you see, when you have 0 errors and warnings or suggestions, it will display no accessibility issues found. People with disabilities should not have difficulty reading this document. Now the same thing with PowerPoint. So here's PowerPoint. Also here you can do it from Review, Check Accessibility. It's the same method even in PowerPoint. So you go File, Info, Inspect Presentation, Check Accessibility, and here you have your errors. So I have a couple of things missing here. Missing alternative text for all of these. So just for time purposes, I'm going to just mark them decorative for now. This is a placeholder, which is, it's a non-informative decorative image. All right. And then the slide does not have a title. Okay, and I just set a title, and now it says again, no accessibility issues found. So once you have this, it confirms that your document is 508 compliant. But again, as I mentioned before, please do not rely just on the accessibility checker. It's good to have, but then there are other manual checks that you will have to do. Back to the presentation, please. Next slide, please. So I just demonstrated on how to check for the accessibility checker. And that's just a thing that you should practice every time you create a source file. And once you get the hang of it, it'll be second nature. I'm just bringing up my slide. All right, next slide, please. Now, document properties is also very important, just like the accessibility checker. It is always a good practice to check and fill out the document properties before you start working on your source file. The document properties tells the screen readers what the document is about and who authored it. All properties must be completed. Do not change the language field to anything other than English. Do not enter the name of a person or private organization for the author's field. And the author must be an organization and not a person. It cannot be Swati Daniels or anyone else. It has to be either CMS, HHS, or whatever organization that you are working on. I will demo on how to fill out the document properties within Word. So here's our document, our Word document. What you'll do is go to File, you'll go to Info, and within this Properties area, you're going to select Properties, Advanced Properties. This will show you more document properties, and this is where you'll enter all the information. So for example, the title is File 1. That does not make sense because a screen reader, it's just not a good use of a title. So for example, I'll just do 508 Word Training. So that would be the title of your presentation or your Word document. The subject can be, it could be training, it could be workshop, it could be anything you want. I usually just use the title as a subject. It just makes it so much easier, but you can always change it to your liking. And then like I said, the author cannot be a person, so I would remove myself and put in CMS. You can always add more. You can spell it out. You can do, Center for Medicare Medicaid Services. You can add more acronyms if you want, but it cannot be an individual person. Sometimes the author gets filled out automatically because if you own the document, it kind of fills your name out. So always remember to double check. Manager, company can be left blank. Now, keywords, you can enter keywords if you'd like. It's not necessary. So always remember, these are the very most important things: the title, the author, the subject. And the same thing in PowerPoint. So you go to PowerPoint, File, Info. This is the Properties section. So you go to Properties, Advanced Properties. Same thing here. So PowerPoint presentation is meaningless to somebody using a screen reader. So again, I can change this to 508 Training Slides. Subject would be just training. Author would be CMS or HHS or NIH. It could be as many as you want. And then you would always save. Always remember to save all your stuff, always. All right, back to presentation, please. Next slide, please. So listed here are a few resources to assist you with creating 508 compliant documents. The Color Contrast Analyzer tool will help with determining the color ratio for all colored text. The Word and PowerPoint 508 checklists are very handy to reference when working with the source files. If all the items on the checklist are implemented in your 508 compliance process, then making files compliant will be easier. This is the last 508 concept I wanted to share. Let's pause at this moment to see if we have any dialogue around this. Nikki, can you please remind folks how to get into the queue for Q&A? And I will speak with the once the operator gets things open, I'll answer all your questions. And meanwhile, I'll go ahead and check with Anita to see if we have any chat questions.
At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press the star and 1 on your touch-tone phone. You may withdraw your question at any time by pressing the pound key. Once again, to ask a question, please press the star and 1 on your touch-tone phone. And we will pause a moment to allow questions to queue.
So I have a question here asking, when the number of characters on the flyer exceeds 180 characters, can you use abbreviations in alt text, for example, national for national? Yes, that is acceptable.
Star and 1 on your touch-tone phone if you would like to ask a question.
We do have a question in chat from Alex Bronk. I have been following along and I don't see the option to make an image as decorative. What version of Microsoft Office do you have?
I believe I have the latest one, which would be 2016, I believe. Let me see. Perhaps it's a tool. I can check on that for you. It might be like a ribbon, or you might have to add in the plugin. I'm not very sure, but it should be there. I have the latest version, so I'm not sure if your version has to be updated.
Question
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. I see a question in chat. Do we have to list all the data in a graph as alt text if the narrative below describes what's being shown in the graph? No, you do not have to list it, but you can mention it in the alt text, say, here is a graph describing so-and-so, details follow, or details can be found below. Nikki, did you have a question on the phone?
Question coming from the line of Ellen Murphy. Please go ahead. Your line is open. Ellen, your line is open.
I'm sorry. Hi, this is Ellen.
Hi, Ellen.
Question. When working in PowerPoint, I have placed or tagged an object as decorative, and I have found out when I go later in the process maybe to complete my accessibility check through Adobe Acrobat, it will flag that object again. Is there just something slightly different between those two programs that would make that happen?
Yes. What happens is sometimes when you convert that source file into an Acrobat, like a PDF, it doesn't always convert over. So you may have to go back and look. So what I do is I always have my Word document or PowerPoint open with the alt text there, and I just cut and copy. I paste it in my PDF. So yes, that will happen. Sometimes you'll lose it, and that's just something that's just a glitch that Adobe has. But thanks for asking that because that's very important as well. Yes.
Great. Thank you for the tip. I appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome.
And 1 on your touch-tone phone if you would like to ask a question. Further questions at this time?
seeing there's a question coming through the chat. I'm just going to wait a little bit. How do screen readers interpret acronyms, CMS, HHS? They just read it out the way you type it. So it would just say CMS, HHS. It will not spell it out unless you spell it out. So if you want a screen reader to actually say Health and Human Services, then you would have to type that whole thing out, the whole acronym. I hope that answers your question, Mark. So I have a request to demonstrate alt text in PowerPoint again, so I'll go ahead and do that right now. Can I demo my screen? Thank you. So here is an image of a pyramid. Let me move this down. So here's a pyramid full of information. So right now I marked it decorative because I was doing a sample. I was doing an example. So here's a pyramid of information. So what you would do is if this was not here, you're just looking at your PowerPoint, you would click on the image. You know, it gets highlighted. You would right click, edit alt text. Okay, and that opens up your alt text window here and gives you the field, the box to put in the information. So for example, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but just for example, pyramid describing what is resilience. And then and then I would write out what is written there. So self-fulfillment needs, and then psychological needs, and then basic needs. So I would have a heading. And then I would just write self-actualization. And then I could have another subheading under that, and then just write out everything. So that's how you do alt text within PowerPoint. So you just click on the image, you right-click, edit alt text, and this is where you fill it out. And if it was something just decorative, like this image right here, it would be marked as decorative, and it will be ignored. Back to presentation, please. I'll just wait for questions for a little bit more. And just a reminder, if you note down your questions, we will be having another Q&A session later in the month. So if you think of something, you can definitely join that, register, and I can answer further questions. All right. Since we don't have any more questions, can I please have the next slide, please? So here's information about joining other DVAC 508 trainings. At this moment, can we please have the poll questions? And if you can please take a minute to answer these questions for feedback for today's training. May we have our second poll question, please? May I please get back to the presentation? All right. Next slide, please. This brings us to the end of the training presentation. I'd like to summarize the key points we learned today. We covered the main guidelines used to create compliant Word and PowerPoint documents. Some of the important items to always remember are to make sure the document properties are filled out correctly, all images that are informative have the correct alt text, all colored text meets the contrast requirements, always use the application's built-in tools to create tables, headings, and bullets. Once these main guidelines are incorporated in all 508 compliance processes, it will make it easier to maintain compliant documents. After the training, a 508 checklist will be provided for both Word and PowerPoint documents along with this presentation. Please join us every Thursday afternoon through June, Wednesday afternoon, excuse me, where we'll tackle other 508 topics. Links to register for these sessions are included on the last slide. There will be a Q&A session held on June 24th for any additional questions you may have. Please feel free to register and bring your questions. Thank you so much for your interest and attendance today. Have a safe and wonderful day.